Welcome everybody. This is Avoiding Death by Webinar, and it's about effective presentations in this virtual context that we're in. And where we want to go today is, well, first let me introduce myself. My name is John Losey. I know some of us go way back. I just was noticing Mark over here. I can't remember what we first met in Colorado a bunch of years ago, and some other people who I've met more recently. But to let you know a little bit about who I am, I started off in doing camping and conferencing, and then I moved into consulting, and then I moved into the corporate world, where in 2009, we started doing webinars in the organization I was in, and we learned that webinars are different than in-person presentations, and I'll talk a little bit about what the differences are later on. And then I came out of the corporate world and back into consulting, mostly around leadership development, professional development, organizational development, doing coaching and consulting. But in the last 6-7 months, I've been tossed into this virtual world. I've been working with Zoom for 3 years, worked in WebEx before that, GoToMeeting. So I've jumped around the platforms a bit. So what I'm talking about isn't just for Zoom, it's for all the different platforms that you might experience. So as we step into this, I want to talk a little bit about, so that's a little bit about who I am, and I want to get into the webinars that we've all been experiencing, and I want to get your take on what's good and what's bad about them. The biggest thing that I've noticed when we started working with, and I've worked with executives, I've worked with trainers, I've worked with teachers, I've worked with really a broad population, and I've worked with some fantastic in-person facilitators and teachers. And when we put them online, when they started doing webinars, they crashed and burned. And so back in 2009, we had our best trainers do a webinar, and it was horrific. Not because they weren't good teachers, leaders, facilitators, it was because it was a different platform that demanded different skills. And slightly tweaking some of them that they had, and also acquiring some brand new ones. We also discovered it wasn't all the facilitator's fault. You had to have a different design. You had to look at what you're trying to do a little bit differently. So whether I do a lot of my own design for my presentations and my facilitation, so that's one thing. But when you're trying to present somebody else's design and they haven't designed it for the right platform, it makes it really difficult to adapt to it. So we're going to look at both of those aspects, the design aspect, also the presentation aspect, and we'll see how far we can get through there. Now, there's two very different types of webinars. There's more than that, but I'm going to divide it up into live and recorded. Now, give me a thumbs up, either reaction or otherwise, if you've ever done a recorded webinar. Anybody? Anybody do recorded ones? Okay. What about live webinars? Okay. Now, have you been to, can you spot the difference between a live and recorded webinar? And give me a thumbs up if you can spot the difference between a live and a recorded webinar. Okay. Kind of, I see a few kind of in there. So I want you to think about that, and if I had to use just a couple of words about what this workshop is about, it's about, if you think through the eyes of your participant, that's what this is about. Because you're going to be asked to do pre-recorded and you're going to ask to do live webinars, and you need to think about the person watching it. There's a big push right now. I'm helping design a few conferences right now. And the people who are organizing it all want to do pre-recorded. Why do they want to do pre-recorded? Not because it's better, because it's less risk. And they're afraid of what might happen when you go live. And rightfully so. But the fact of the matter is, live or pre-recorded, there's going to be technological difficulties around what we're doing. So let's a little bit about how we're going to get through this, and then I want to get your perspective on what's most important for you today. What we'll do is I'm going to do my best to model a good webinar, and I'm sure I'm going to fall short of everything that I say, so please take my performance with a grain of salt, but I know what I'm going to deliver is good stuff. But don't try to do it all at once. Pick one or two things that work for you and try it out. So we're going to cover, there's 5 areas that we're going to look at in this. Just to be a good educator, I'm going to talk about the outcomes. This is the outcomes we're looking at. I want to introduce you to 5 areas that will help improve your online virtual presentation skills. I want you to walk away with this, with confidence that you can do better than what's already being done out there. And I want you to build a vision that there's a role for webinars, virtual presentations, virtual facilitation. Right now, definitely. But even afterwards, there's a role for this that could make your in-person content, your in-person workshops, your courses, even that much more powerful if it's done right. The topics we're looking at are going to be general presentation skills. Like what thumbs up if you've been to a presentation skills workshop at all in your life. Anybody ever been to a presentation skills workshop? Toastmasters? Any Toastmasters out there? Okay, Jessica's wondering what Toastmasters are. So these are all sources that you can go to for live presentation skills. And I want to find out what are the transferable skills, because we can't throw everything out. There's still some things that transfer over. So presentation skills that are transferable to the virtual world. Second one is visual. This is a very visual medium, even though we aren't in person. And a little brain science here, 50 to 70% of your brain is dedicated to visual stimulus and visual processing. And so if we aren't tending to the visual aspects of this medium, then we're missing out on a big piece of it. Audio, the audio aspect. So it's visual, audio. We're going to look at, one option is looking at engagement and interaction. And then the last topic is presentation design. Now, this is a bunch of information. And we're not going to get through it all. I can't go through it and do it justice, all of it today. So I want to find out from you guys, what is most important to you that we cover? And I'm going to do that by giving you, again, the same Mentimeter link, the same polling link, but I want you to go to the poll, and we're going to talk about the transferable one. So of visual, audio, engagement and interaction, and presentation design, what is rank those based on the importance to you today. What do you really want to cover, and rank them 1 to 4? Any questions on any troubles getting to Mentimeter? Or yes, I can post those in chat. We're talking visual, audio, engagement, and design. So those 4 areas, and I want you to just take a moment. What's most important to you to figure out, and then that's where I'm gonna spend the time today. All right, we'll do full disclosure here, and I'll show you the results of your poll. This is what we're looking at. We've got engagement, interaction, presentation design, visual, and audio taking up the rear. And we're gonna start off just talking about transferable skills, and we'll go there in just a minute. But as we go through, I'm going to be skipping around my PowerPoint presentation to make sure we get to what you need and what you want. So this is what's coming next. Let me stop sharing here. And in just a moment, we're going to send you out to breakout rooms. And in the breakout rooms, what I want you to do is discuss the transferable presentation skills. What skills that work in the in-person environment do you think are transferable to the virtual environment? You're going to be in a room with 3 or 4 people, and I want you to talk about it, and then in a long form, you can post it into the Mentimeter slide of what works there. And so we can capture your guys' thoughts about transferable skills. So you understand, we're going to head out to breakout rooms, 3 or 4 people. Of course, introduce yourself and where you're from. Make sure that people know where you're coming from. But then spend most of the time just sharing ideas on which in-person presentation skills are still important in the virtual context? And I'll write that question in the small groups. You guys know what you're talking about? Give me a thumbs up if you're good with the conversation. All right. And I'm going to send you guys out there, and I'll set the timer and come back in about 10 minutes. Enjoy. So I put the link to the polling thing in there. So as we wrap this up, I'd love to capture your thoughts on the transferable skills from in-person to virtual. And you've got more that this isn't like a word cloud. This is more like Twitter, where you can type, I think up to 240 characters in there. But tell me, what struck you, like in your small group conversation, what were some of the things you talked about that are just like, well, of course these things need to transfer. And I want you to be specific besides just like being good or whatever. What specific skills do you need to bring into the virtual world that you already have? What are some things you talked about? Yeah, Dean.
Well, we talked about three things actually. Is one, bringing our normal energy, personality that we would have from that was easily transferable, I think. The second one is engaging the audience, because as I mentioned in our group, I said I don't do presentations, I do conversations with people. And then the third one is being prepared, and even more so in this virtual world, is like, hey, have we double checked, the presentation, make sure our router's been restarted to make sure it's not going to go out in the middle of a presentation, things like that. But those are what our group, came up with. So.
What else?
We talked about all of them. We just said there's not a skill that I can think of that is useful in-person facilitation that is not useful in virtual facilitation. It's really what we spend more of our time talking about is it's that and a few new skills and concepts that you really got to wrap your heads around. Yeah. Go ahead.
The only thing that I think is different is like, so when I teach in-person skills, I talk about how you use the room. And I think it's different. I mean, it's not, I can't like walk around this room and change people's field of view, and I can't necessarily bring in some of the things that I would normally do. However, those same concepts apply. And how do you change people's field? How do you get them up and moving? There's just, there's a couple of things that are different. They're the same, but they look different in the virtual world. I think you're right. It's the same concepts that keep people's attention. What else did you guys talk about? Go ahead, Mitch.
So for us, we talked about eye contact still being important. So where you might have, if you're using more than one screen, where you might have your notes and so forth is important. We talked about setting meeting expectations beforehand. For instance, I'll send out notes before a meeting saying, it's a cameras on meeting and, what my general expectations are. We talked about, working from the frame of reference for our participants. So, what's going on in their household or workplace, in the background that we might need to be considerate of. Talked about asking people questions in advance to get a sense of, what their take is on, what's upcoming. We talked about having an agenda. And John, we're wondering about an agenda for this meeting now that we've had that conversation, of course. And there's a discussion of visuals being important as well to get, use some visuals along the way. So that was Laura and Jessica and I.
Yeah. So, because those of you who've worked with me before know that I usually send out an agenda and all that kind of stuff. Why in this context might I not have sent out an agenda? Go ahead, Sandy.
Because you let us pick it. Like you asked what we wanted to know.
Yeah, that's the main piece of why I didn't do it, is because as I started to put this together, I have in my notes, the small group conversation things and the agenda, send it out to everybody. But then I realized that I've got an hour and a half to cover probably 2 or 3 days worth of material. So I better give you guys the choice of where you want to go. I could just say, welcome, figure out where we want to go, close. I'll send that out if you want, if you're interested. So,
Or
well,
you
what
could
I-
have pre-recorded it and we might not even know.
well, that's an important piece because you talked about eye contact. Is it different eye contact with a camera versus eye contact in a room? Because my eyes tend to wander. I've got gallery view up right now. Now I could help control your eye where you guys are looking because I can spotlight my video for everybody. And now everybody's looking at me. Look at me, look at me. And I've got to be very conscious not to look off to the side where you guys are at. I've got to continue to keep that eye contact there. So that's something that's a little bit different because most of us, like what Dean was saying, we're used to creating a conversation in a room. And it's very different when you're looking at a gallery. And you think of the difference between when it's pre-recorded versus live. How can you simulate having that conversation even if it's pre-recorded? And I find like when I do the virtual conferences, that's why it turns into this presenter talking head reading off a PowerPoint where sometimes they don't even show their face. It's just all PowerPoint and bullet points and things like that. So to me, it's important to learn that, again, it's all about eye contact, but eye contact with a camera and not necessarily with the people in the room, because then it looks kind of like this. Now, when we get into visuals, we could talk about how you could make it look like you're looking at everybody when really you're looking at your notes or whatever you need to. So those are all important things. And what I wanted to do is make sure you knew that you do have transferable skills. When all this first hit, there was a lot of despair out there of, I like being in person. I like the connection that I have. I really need that in order to thrive as a presenter. And you can still be effective. You may not feel it, but part of it is looking through the eyes of your participant and how are they experiencing you. Making sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to spend too much time on this because my guess is you guys have had a lot of presentation training. In fact, if you are going into teaching, if you're going into facilitation, that's got to be some of your core learning of how to make it work. So let's take a look at engagement next. So this is something that we've been, since the first week, we've been having conversations around how do you engage and connect with people, especially the crowd of experiential and adventure programmers who thought that their whole world had collapsed. But then we started talking about, well, this can really work. You can connect and you can engage with people. And I'm gonna put Dan Miller on the spot here because he is one of those early people who said, it'll never work. We can't do this stuff. Dan, just take a moment and share your journey from experiential adventure, outward bound boy to now being one of the best people in the world for virtual facilitation. What turned you?
Thank you, my friend. And I'll just go back to say, I don't know if what I said was this will never work, but it was definitely a fear that I had. And for folks that know me, I've always been a little skeptical of relying on technology for presentation skills. I didn't use PowerPoints when I did live presentations, just not into it because that stuff always would fail on me and make me look bad. And so if I didn't rely on it, then I looked pretty good. I like to think. But honestly, what happened for me is I got engaged with a lot of different folks, yourself included, that were like, hey, instead of just kind of crumbling in a corner and thinking that our whole industry is gonna die, we started to look at how can we make this work? And we got one client that when everything else had canceled, they came back and they said, hey, can you do this orientation for a higher education MBA program that you used to do over 2 days on a ropes course, on a lake, outside? Can you do it virtually? And we were just like, yes, of course we can. And then we had about a month to figure out how to do it. And what I found was it was a joy to like figure it out together with a team of people. And that was crucial, is that I had a team and I wasn't just on my own. But we just started playing and getting creative and kind of treating, this whole space with Zoom and Jamboard and Google Slides and Mural like a big canvas. and just having fun with it, playing games, reinventing things. And we found almost everything that we used to do in person could somehow transfer to a virtual activity. What was really different is that we scripted things like to the letter, to the second, who's doing this, who's doing that. We're 5 minutes in, this is going to happen. And that was, honestly, that was somewhat of a downer compared to like how we used to do it in person. But maybe like 5 or 6 programs later, when all this stuff is working and the technology is actually not failing me, it started to get back to like, I have a bunch of tools in my toolbox and I can bust them out depending on what's going on with my group. And I can change, like you are right now, I can change my presentation based on what I'm seeing happen in the group in front of me. And right now, like I am preaching that there are a number of things we can do even better in the virtual world than we used to do in person. And it's blowing my mind. And I'm getting more work now than I did when I was doing this as a side gig, several months ago. And so, yeah, my soapbox now is it is very possible to have excellent virtual facilitation experiences, and both as a facilitator and a participant.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And let's talk about, and I don't want to get too deep into this because I'll keep it as simple as possible. And this way, there's a couple of different workshops that I do and some others that are out there where you can get just tons and tons of demonstration and ideas on how to engage and connect with people. The phrase that's going around right now, and it's been going around for a while, but you need to connect before you get to content. And it's true of presentations, and not just, you do need to connect people together, but you also need to connect people to whatever you're talking about. And there's a book called To Know As We Are Known. And I'm blanking on the author right now because I didn't plan on talking about it. But what he does is basically say, you know what, you need to come into relationship, not just with the teacher and not just with each other, but that same sort of relationship with the content that you're building. And as a presenter, you need to know how to create an opportunity for that relationship to form and to grow with your content. Parker Palmer, thank you very much, Cheryl. I've got a good story about how I was introduced to Parker Palmer. I raided another university's bookstore and looked at what they were teaching their students. So I grabbed, I probably ruined their book count by grabbing all the books. So, but the idea is you create relationship, connect people with each other, and that helps them connect with your content as well. But there's some really great workshops. I do one called, and I'll cover really the high level of orienting to virtual platforms. But there's a ton of people that are doing great stuff out there on the engagement, the actual activities. A little bit about how do you create connection and engagement, first of all, just with your voice. First is, and this is true across all presentations, if you're anything like me, I tend to get into a presentation and I talk really, really fast because I'm afraid I'm not going to get to all the content. I want to make sure I get it through all of it, and then we can process things. But first I want to talk really, be aware of pace. First thing to be aware of is overall, things go slower in the virtual context. Everything takes more time. And kind of juxtaposed or paradoxically, you need to move slower through your content. And you'll be tempted as you look at the clock and say, oh my gosh, I'd only planned 5 minutes for that and we're now 15 minutes in. You'll have to have that self-management to go, all right, I can't go faster because that's not going to help. And some judgment, you're going to have some judgment about what you build in and what you don't build in. So that's one thing, and that's transferable across the board. Know about pace. Also with that, know that you need to move every 20 to 30 minutes. So when I'm building a workshop that's in person, you got to do bio breaks every 90 minutes or so. And I think of visual framing every 45 minutes. But you've got to move every 20 to 30 minutes in order to keep people engaged. And this is where I believe that Zoom fatigue is a myth. you don't have to get tired doing Zoom. Or your participants don't have to get tired using Zoom. And proof of this is some stuff that I've done, but also now that I'm in a great community of people that do this all the time. We were in a group last week where one of the people, these are all professionals who do facilitation and training and presentation. They said that they had a program that was 4 days straight of 4 hours of Zoom a day. 5 days? Okay. I've been corrected.
5 hours a day.
5 hours a day. 4 days straight, 5 hours a day. And the people coming at the end did not experience Zoom fatigue. If anything, it was cognitive fatigue. But they were engaged that whole time. And I said this about PowerPoint, and I'll say this about virtual platforms. When you talked about PowerPoint and you blamed PowerPoint for a bad presentation, it's like blaming a crappy house on your hammer. Don't blame the tool. Blame the builder. And that's what I want to put out there, is that you guys can be doing spectacular presentations that don't even necessarily have to be process-based or interaction-based. But if you use the tool correctly and some simple engagement pieces, you can get to not just the connection and not just to the content. When I work with businesses, it's very important that we get to objectives and outcomes that are more than just me making my points. You got to get stuff done. And that can be done in a very powerful and an interactive way that I believe that you guys can go out and change the definition of what a webinar is and what it looks like, just by climbing into the perspective of the participants and understanding what they're experiencing. So don't forget, movement every 20-30 minutes. As a matter of fact, we're just over 30 minutes in, and I want to do a little movement here. And I'm going to do this using something some of you are very familiar with, some of you not so much. But there's an app out there called Flippity. And this is really simple. I'm going to ask you guys, I'm going to spin this wheel, and it's going to come up with something for you guys to do. And then we just get up and do it. So let's see what we get to do. All right. Reach for the sky. You can stand, you can sit, you can do whichever you want. I recommend standing if you can. Reach up for the sky. All right, so let's try this again. You can see how quick this goes. One more. And count your nose. Ready? Here we go. 1. Good job. All right, let's get back to the content here. So what else about connecting? I want to ask you a question. I want you to chat the answer in the chat box. How often should you ask for interaction in a virtual context? How often should you create engagement or ask for interaction in the virtual context? So go ahead and chat your answer in. All right, I see, okay, 5 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, 10 minutes. So, and this is one of the first things that I learned back in 2009 in interacting with somebody who did webinars literally every day, a couple of times a day, live interactive webinars. And I think this also transfers to recorded webinars. What she said was, you need to ask for engagement every 3 to 5 minutes. And it's different than when I'm doing a live presentation in person. I mean, I'm thinking in terms of every 10 or 15 minutes, I'm doing something to refocus people. I'm doing something to get their attention back, not on me, but on the topic. Different in this context in that, like, you've got this much space that you're working with. And all people have to do is look off just a little bit, and they're in their email, or they're taking care of that mess that's off to the side of their desk, or whatever. And I would say if every 3 minutes, you're probably keeping focus. You're probably keeping their engagement. Every 5 minutes, you're regaining their focus and regaining their attention. And when I first started doing this, it sounded really unnatural. Like I'm just thinking up stuff that every once in a while I got to do. But the more that I do the presentation style this way, the more natural it seems. And there's easy, just really, really simple things that you can do to keep that attention. So this is the high level view of my orientation of virtual platforms. And this is true of any platform you're going to go into. There's one kind of group of them that are Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting. And then you have the other group that's more like the Google Meets and Microsoft Teams. Don't think of those in the same category. They're both really effective for what they are, but they're not the same thing. A lot of the people who I work on Zoom with and they have to do a Microsoft meeting or Microsoft Teams thing, they just throw up their hands and go, this is horrible, this is terrible. It has its good parts. Video meetings aren't part of it yet. Anybody who works in Microsoft Teams? Anybody in here in this meeting? Okay. There is what you can do with the project aspect of it by sharing those documents. Awesome. Same thing that we found in Google when you're doing Google Drive and sharing slides and all that. Really fantastic that way. The virtual meeting part, less so. But these same concepts apply. There's 3 general tools that you've got to create connection and engagement in any virtual context. The first one is the visual or in-camera stuff, where we're talking about, okay, give me a thumbs up. How hard is that? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can give me a thumbs up? Wonderful. Now a friend, Tom Leahy, uses what he calls the new rule of thumb to say, now you can, instead of just yes or no, you can get some sort of feel out there and say yes, maybe, or partially, or no. So now you have this gauge. If you really want to get sophisticated, you could use it just like a gauge and say, where are you at with this topic right now? Totally in, totally buy in, a little bit, still positive, but not all the way there, to nah, still got some convincing, and then no way. So really simple way to get a really broad sense of where your participants are at. Another one that I like, and this is one that I was introduced to just in the last 2 months, and that is, because I'm a fan of the Likert scale, and you geeks out there know what I'm talking about. It's a way to find out how much do you agree with this statement. And fist to 5, it's called. 5 being the Likert scale. So fist to 5, I think virtual webinars can be extremely powerful. Fist to 5, where are you at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 5. Yeah. See how easy that is to get some engagement? What you're asking people to do is to move, click, type, or talk every 3 to 5 minutes. So that's one, in-camera stuff. Ton of things you can do in camera. And those are just 2 really quick ones. Let's talk about what I call nonverbal or alongside. And I'm mixing things in a little bit here. There's stuff that's in-app, stuff that's alongside the app, and stuff that is outside the app. So inside the app is the camera. Inside the app is also like reactions. I love that Zoom put in the reactions. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, there's that reactions tab. And if you notice, it's just positive. So they're so kind that way. So give me one of those reactions just for kicks. Yay. Now I'm going to share my Zoom screen, and I want to show you another really cool tool that people don't use, but it was really helpful when I was doing the Roberts Rule of Order. I don't have that option here, but there's a hand raise. You guys have a hand raise. When you go to participants at the bottom, you'll say raise your hand. Raise your hand if you can see the hand to raise. If you guys can see the hand, I see a few people. Now the good part about the hand raise is that it shows up in your video box. So I can take a really quick look either in the participant panel or in your boxes to see whose hand's up. If you wanted to take a vote, or you wanted to, even if you want to ask questions in the middle of everything, you have that option there. So those are what I would call nonverbal interactions. And I'm going to lower everybody's hand. So the next part is let's talk about those are all things that are in the app, and every virtual platform has its own ways of interacting that are built into the app, and use those. As a matter of fact, this goes into whenever you go to the help on whatever, like you go to Zoom help, they're going to tell you everything that's available in Zoom, but they're not going to take you outside of Zoom. You go to GoToMeeting, you go to a WebEx, they will tell you exactly how to use their product, and they will do everything they can to keep you in their product. But there's a ton of tools, and this revolutionized my thinking about virtual. When you think about what can I use alongside, very popular one is talking about annotating. So when you go to your PowerPoint annotation, so right now I'll share my PowerPoint screen. No real purpose to annotate, but now I can ask you, earlier I did a map, and annotate where you're from. I can put in here, I want you to, put a circle of which person you most relate to, or whatever it is. That is an app that's alongside of Zoom. Simple. But can anybody say maybe another app that I've used alongside Zoom today?
Meter?
Mentimeter. Simple polling, actually a much better polling software than what you find in Zoom. Zoom has polling, but all you can do is multiple choice. But as soon as I went outside, we can then do word clouds, we could do ranking, we could do, there's actually quiz contests. Any other outside app that I brought in or alongside app? How do we do the motion? The what?
Mural.
Mural, we haven't brought that in today, but you played with that before.
Oh,
Mural,
I thought that's what the, okay.
that's fine. I used Flippity today. We've mentioned Mural. Mural is a collaboration app that's in the cloud, and everybody can be on it at the same time, moving things around. You could talk about it. Tom Leahy, who joined us for a moment here, did a great exercise doing the maze in Mural. So think in terms of what can I do and what can I use that goes alongside of Zoom or WebEx, whatever platform you're on, to create connection and engagement. Built in is their pulling up. Built in is the small group stuff. You take people in the small groups and you can leverage the small group dynamics and create connection and engagement that way. So you have things that are in the app, things that are alongside, and then you think in terms of the things that are outside. And I think of this like negative space advertising. You know the Arrow and FedEx? You know there's so many great advertisements that use the negative space or the white space. Well, the white space of webinars and virtual meetings is that time between engagements. So if you're just doing one webinar, you have the time before the webinar even starts to create engagement. And you can do that with things like Todd mentioned Mural, which is an app. You can do that with sending out an agenda. You can do it with a shared Google Doc or Google Slide. Same thing as if you have if you're doing classes or you're doing a series, you can use that time in between sessions for them to do different things. Think in terms of whether you create a Facebook community or you have your own membership community, can you get people to interact asynchronously between sessions? And can you have them continue the conversation that you left, or can you start one that leads into the momentum leads into the session? So when it comes to creating engagement and creating interactions, 3 general choices: stuff that the app already comes with, stuff that you can use alongside the app, and the stuff that's outside the app. Asynchronous, outside the app. So somebody asked the question, what is the name of the map app John used at the start of the webinar? It's a very obscure app called PowerPoint, and going to online and finding a license-free, a free map that I can put up there. And they're all out there, and it's one of the simplest things that you can do. And one of the simplest interactions that you can do in Zoom is annotating. It's getting easier in the other apps as well. They're all trying to catch up. Before we move on, any questions, comments, concerns about engagement and interaction? And mute or in the chat. All right, let's get into the next one, which is presentation design. And again, this could be a semester course. As a matter of fact, there's certificates and degrees, advanced degrees in design, curriculum design, and all kinds of stuff. The most popular format out there for design is called ADDIE. And I'll see if I can bring it up here. And it's analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. And those are 4 simple steps to think of. I think of it a little bit differently, just because that's the way my brain works. And I think of ready, aim, fire, score. If I did, like I said, I worked at camps, and so archery was a big thing. And getting ready is probably more important than any other thing, because what you focus on is what you will hit. And so when you're getting ready, this is called intake. This is if you're working with clients and they're asking you to do a program or a presentation, you need to really get crystal clear of what success will look like to them. Not to you, but to your client. If you're not working for a client and you're just creating your own thing, you need to create your outcome statements, your objective statements, so that they're crystal clear what you're shooting at. The reason why this is so hard is that a lot of times people don't like to create that really, really, really specific objective or outcome because it's easier to miss. And we have this thing about failure. If you've ever watched, I talked with some archery and shooting instructors, and then I heard it again in, if you remember the Mel Gibson movie, The Patriot, aim small, miss small. When you paint the target, paint it as specifically as possible so you know exactly what you're trying for. Not that you are going to hit it, but you'll learn how you missed. And that's how you get better. You need to paint your target very, very just tiny so that you know how you miss. So that's the ready part. It's the design aspect of it. It's the intake form. It's when you talk with them, you get really kind of clear, not just, well, we want people to communicate better. Now that's not real helpful because we don't know what that looks like. I want people to, I want people to know about ecology. Well, what do you mean by that? What does that look like? What is success? So you want to get it down to specific behaviors. What do you want them to say? What do you want them to think? What do you want them to do as a result of your program? Then the aiming part is the program design. And this is where I'm a little bit different than ADDIE, is that I think that in the ready part, that's when you design your evaluation. You design it before you build your program. Because what tends to happen is if you wait to design your evaluation until after you build your program, you're not going for your objectives. You just created a self-fulfilling prophecy for your program. I built the program and that's what I meant it to do. So part of getting ready is building that evaluation. Aiming is building the program. It's the design aspect. It's the administration aspect. It's making sure that you don't only have a good design, but you've practiced it. You've checked it against your outcomes. And then you fire, execute, get it done. Because all of it is, that's not, if you ready and aim and you never fire, what's the point? And there's a lot of people who do that. There's a lot of people who ready, fire, aim. Oh yeah, that's what I meant to do. And then the scoring aspect of it. To me, I mean, I try and do it with every program that I do, but I don't always get to it. I want to get to a complete program, and I need to be better at asking participants or even the people who engage me, because sometimes the people who engage you aren't the people who participate, but you got to find out, did it work? That's that ready, aim, fire. Look at how you missed. The only way you'll know how you missed is if you somehow score it. and you created a really specific objective and outcome so that you know how you missed. Ready, aim, fire, score. If you're interested in a deeper look, this one gets kind of convoluted and it's not a good graphic, but this is the way that I build my program design cycle. When you get into it, you've got the ready parts, needs assessment, define outcomes, create evaluation strategy, aim, start design planning, check it against your outcomes, fire, implement the plan, score, administer the evaluation, and compare actual outcomes to desired outcomes. And each of those can be broken down. And again, to go any deeper, we'd have to dedicate another day or week or semester. But does that give me a thumbs up, or use that gauge? Does that give you some perspective on moving forward? I know some of you guys just know this inside and out, and for others, this is a new concept. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Hey, John.
Yes, Tom.
Just a comment on that cycle. I'm the epitome of an experiential learner. I kind of wallow into it and jump in both feet, make a lot of mistakes. What I'm really good at is I learn from what I did, and then I change it for the next time. I rebuild my script, and so I kind of do this whole thing backwards, but I eventually get there. I do like your approach.
Yeah. Well, and Tom, knowing you, you have naturally gone to this cycle. It's just that it's a cycle, so it doesn't matter where you start. It matters that you try and hit all these things, and not necessarily in this order. This is a logical order. Mm-hmm. But from our conversations, you do this really well, especially around the evaluation. You probably have more thorough notes on every program you've ever done than anybody else I know. And that's something I learned from, I am inspired by you about, is making sure that I go back. And if I'm ever going to do this program again, I want to make sure I learned from the last time I did it.
Well, I think there's a value in piloting something. You do it and it's better and it's better. And I tell my business clients too, by the third group we do, we'll have this all worked out. I've never designed anything that was more than 50% on target the first time, but by the third, it's about 93. So that's cool.
Yeah. I love that you say about 93. All right, let's get into, I think this is the last thing we're going to be able to cover with the time that we've got. And I want to talk about the visuals. The first piece about the visual is just talking about what do you look like in screen. But let's talk about how you put your screen up here. And the first one is just framing. I've got a good friend, and I'll share the resources. A guy named Josh Pies, who is he does media for companies. He does it for marketing. He's a producer. But one of the things he encourages is that if all you've got is a cell phone, you can start designing, you can start creating, you can start putting content out there. So it's not about the equipment, although I'm a geek, so I like collecting things like that. It's about how you use what you've got to get started. There's an old saying out there that says anything worth doing is worth doing well. But the lesser known is anything worth starting is worth starting poorly. So if I can see all you guys have some sort of camera up there, but if all you had was your cell phone, you could start creating content with that. Josh gives a kit of how to do like really, really good professional feel with a cell phone and less than $500 worth of equipment and software. So you don't have to spend a ton of money on creating a studio, but you have to know how to use it. And the first one is knowing how to use your orientation. I want to take a look at this versus this. And both are okay. It all depends on what media are you using. So horizontal, this uses up all the real estate of traditionally what tablets and monitors use. And you want to use all the real estate you can. If you're using your camera or your cell phone, this doesn't use all the real estate of a monitor or tablet. So you're wasting almost 2/3 of the screen. However, if you're doing this in social media, if you're doing Facebook Live, if you're doing Instagram, then vertical is really, really helpful because this is how people, I forget what the study is, but over 80% of the people look at their phone in the vertical field. And if you turn it, then all of a sudden horizontal is wasting space. So know what media, again, crawling into the perspective of your participant, what are they looking at when they do this? So think in terms of how you frame. Think about close and far, near and far. And I'm going to spotlight my picture. And I'm going to show you kind of, you have choices here as well. This is where I'm most comfortable. Nobody wants this. Don't do this. It's not fun for anybody. However, once you find what you're comfortable with, if you have what this would be called a headshot, because it actually goes from mid-chest up and I'm not cutting off my head. So this is helpful. I like this because it's a good mix between intimacy and not being too creepy, but also you can go further out and all of a sudden you're starting to see, there's a lot of people who prefer this screen. You're starting to see different things that are outside of the frame normally, but it's choosing what you're most comfortable with. Remember going back to our first conversation, which was about transferable skills? Where is your personality? What framing is your personality best expressed in? If you have a really expressive face, then put it up closer and let your face do the expression. If you're used to using your hands, go further back and get more of your body into it. If you're using some people use a real whiteboard behind them. This is my glass board behind me right there. And there you want that broad look so that you can see the drawing. Other people use different tools. So think in terms of how you're going to frame yourself. Anybody have a general rule? I'm going to stop spotlighting and go ahead and share a general rule about your attire when you're presenting. How do you gauge what you should wear when you're presenting? Mitch.
I just want to make sure I'm not the same color as my background.
Okay, that's good.
If I were wearing a white shirt against my white background, not so great.
Right. But in person, when you're doing an in-person presentation, did anybody, when you went to the presentation training, did they tell you how you should dress for that particular event? Okay. What did you hear, Bray?
They're telling me to wear appropriately with regards to the type of event and the venue.
Yeah. Okay. Type of event and venue. Ed, you have something.
Know the organization well enough to know in a work situation what they would wear and wear that, or maybe just a little bit nicer, but not a three-piece suit to talk to outward bound folks.
Yeah. So the rule of thumb that I had, or that I had heard, was basically a half step up from what the audience is going to be in. And for instance, if I went to speak to a group of bankers or insurance people, and I was wearing my jeans and collared shirt, it wouldn't fly. But like what you were saying, if I went to my camping professionals workshop in a three-piece suit, I would be suspicious. They would wonder what the heck's going on here. What's he trying to sell me? So again, it's looking through the eyes of the participants on how they're going to see you when it comes to the attire. Want to talk a little bit about backgrounds, which have become a big thing now that we're in virtual. Can you think about, just take a minute and think about what is the worst background, or what is distracting about a background that you've witnessed either as a participant or in a meeting? What gets in the way just because the background is there? Ed, what do you got?
Something that looks really interesting and exotic that kind of, you want to look at that more than listen to the presentation.
Okay. What else? Mitch?
Anything where there's some movement that's other than the speaker.
Yeah, that's an important piece because brain science says that movement, our brain is attracted to motion and movement, and it's attracted either towards the focus that you want or away from the focus that you want. And so being intentional and purposeful about what that is crucial. So think about when you have your background up there, if you have a video, is it adding to the presentation or is it taken away from it? If you've got a green screen behind you, is it distracting or is it helping people focus? And now Zoom has the ability to use your PowerPoint as your background, which is kind of neat, but can also get in the way. I think in terms of, for me, and this is just my choice, I tend not to use either green screen or virtual background when I'm presenting. I'll use it in meetings just because it's interesting and fun. But when I'm presenting, I don't want people taking it away. And if you have a green screen, you put your hand up and all of a sudden people can totally tell it's a green screen. And they'll be focusing on, oh, what other green screens does he have? Now, when you're using the virtual background, and Todd, can you, I'm gonna ask you to do something. You're just a participant this time, so no big deal. But I'm gonna pin you, and I want you to move back and forth in depth. Move towards the screen. Oh, you have your green screen up. You don't have your virtual. But you can see his background. You see his shadow there. Let's do, does anybody have a virtual background up? Raise your hand. All right. So Dean, I'm gonna put you up there. I'm gonna pin you. Now I want you to move back and forth. That's pretty good. Now forward. Okay. You got it pretty well lit. Oh, your hand's gone. I freaked some people out one time because I had the virtual background up and I kept on like, I'd move and all of a sudden half my body would there. Dan loves to do his green thing with your green cup. And all of a sudden like his cup is floating around.
Don't have it right now, sorry.
Which is fun in meetings. However, if it takes away from the focus of your presentation, it's distracting. Now, jumping into content creation, stories. Stories are some of the most powerful ways for people to connect with the content you want to share. And they can be one of the more distracting things if they're very, very entertaining. I've seen so many really great presenters. They tell a great story, people are totally entertained, and all they remember is the story, and they don't remember the point. Use your stories on purpose. And it's all about getting to the outcomes. It's all about getting to the objectives. It's not just about telling a good story. And it's so tempting, especially if you're a good storyteller. I learned stories around the campfire, and it was all about entertainment. But then as I started doing presentation using that same storytelling style, people would say, oh, I loved your story about the lions. Well, what was the point? I don't know, but it was a cool story about lions. And I felt like, well, thanks, and I got to do something different. Real quick about lighting. If you're using green screens or it's lighting, again, you don't have to spend a lot of money on lighting, but how you light your room will impact how well people see you. Again, climb into that picture that people are going to be looking at. These are all the visual things. And if, like I look at my background, I intentionally have it a little bit busy back there. This is the image I want to make. However, if I want to, I'm just playing with switching backgrounds around. So you saw the background I put up there. I'm looking at the chats right now. Somebody's talking about cute pets. Great for meetings, not so much if you're trying to make a point. And I've got 3 dogs, and I don't come close to Bray as far as the dog population. He's got like 20. He loves his pets. So I'm playing around with some backgrounds or with some different camera sets. And I think I might have turned off this one. Nope, it's there. So now I've got a different setup. If I want to stand and present, I can stand and present from here. And though you can tell, look at the difference in the lighting here. I don't have my room set up to light this area, so now my head is dark. And remember I promised something about how you can be looking at your notes, but still looking at the camera. Further away you get, they can't tell where your eyes are looking. So I can be looking at my screen right now, even though it looks like I'm looking at the camera. I'm kind of excited about that. Being able to use some different settings in there. So those are some like technical visual pieces. Let's talk about designing your slideshow. Whether it's, again, it's not about PowerPoint. PowerPoint's just a tool, but I wanted to share the absolute worst slide, 2 of the absolute worst slides I can think of. I see people reaching for their glasses and adjusting and all that kind of stuff. There's a myth out there that 3 to 5 bullet points is okay. I don't know how helpful that is, because if all you're doing is reading bullet points, just send them the slide deck. I'll show you guys my apps. This rocked my world when I read it. Presentation Zen by a guy named Gar Reynolds. And what he talks about, he's actually got a series of books. Presentation Zen is kind of the high level. But he talks about how the visuals that you have up next to you up on screen shouldn't be redundant. They should be reinforcing. So if what you say is what's up on the screen, why are you there? And so visual, powerful. Don't think of your words up there as words or narrative. Think of them as visuals. So when you look at the screen that I'm sharing right here, it's just way, way, way too much. And even if I had it, if you look at the size of each of these, it's really hard to see even if it's full screen. So the rule of maximum of 5 bullet points is not real helpful. It's, are you treating them as a visual and not as text? Too many fonts in the same presentation isn't cool or creative. The rule of thumb is no more than two unless you have a purpose and intention in doing it. FYI, fancy and flowy fonts are not intended for presentations. Be sure to spell check and review for typographical errors and autocorrect issues. Now, this is one of my favorite things. When I'm somebody, if I see something really cool and neat, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. So when you discover that there's animations and sound effects, then they can get really annoying. And you're probably the only one who thinks they're neat. This is one that it's really tough because you got to be aware of where your text goes across the screen to make sure that there's enough contrast with the background. If you notice in that next bullet point, checking for alignment, my wife is the queen of checking for alignment. And if it's just a little bit out, it drives her nuts. And I know there's a significant portion of the population that if you move even just a little bit slightly alignment, they're going to see it. And that's all they think about for the rest of your presentation. Cheryl's right there with her. So again, visuals should reinforce your presentation and your content, not be redundant. And here's the next one. And the last one is provide details in handouts or follow-up material. How often do you see something like this in a PowerPoint? And is somebody who wants to make sure they're giving context and all the information, but nobody can read it. And even if you do something to, like you use your cursor to highlight it, it's still hard for people to get that. This is something that goes really, really well in a handout. It goes really, really well in the follow-up materials where it's on a page where people can actually do something with it. It's not as useful in a graphic or in your visuals. The other piece, and this is, I'll get on my soapbox a little bit, pet peeve of mine. If you are sending out your PowerPoint notes pages as your handout, you're lazy. Because they've already got that piece of it. You can do so much more, and it doesn't take that much more time to create some really, really helpful handouts rather than redundant handouts. Those are the 3 pieces that you've got when you're doing a presentation is your presence, the presenter. You got your visuals to reinforce that, and then you have your handout that can bring it all together, and that's the lasting piece. So we're almost out of time here. And what I'd like to do is we're going to skip the audio, but I want you to take a moment. I want you to think about, we covered transferable skills. We covered interactions and connections. We covered the presentation design, and we covered visuals. So much more to do, but for what we got through today, I want to ask you the question. Don't write anything yet, but what has become clear through the process of our workshop today? Emerson used to greet people on the street with this. You can't just walk by it. So if you can take a moment and just think about what became clear. So as we wrap things up, I'm going to leave the simple evaluation up on the Mentimeter. And I'd love for you, if you hang out, I'm going to hang out for a little while longer. But what I hope you walk away with is that, man, virtual presentations, live or recorded, can be powerful. You can do it. You've got skills that can transfer. And I want you guys to go out and change how people define webinars. There's a lot of bad stuff out there. I'm hoping you guys go put great stuff out.